Warning: this video contains super awesome content not suitable for people who don't enjoy super awesomeness.
Hello movie lovers and movie fans all across the world. Welcome back to the channel with me, actor, writer, and director, Kenny K. And welcome to another Top 10 video countdown, this time featuring Top 10 movies you didn't know were remakes, and are they worth watching? A lot of people nowadays seem to complain that there's nothing original anymore. They say that everything that comes out in theaters is either a remake or a spin-off, but I actually say that remakes are something that Hollywood has been doing for a very long time. Now, before I begin my proof, be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos, countdowns, reactions, and movie trivia. So let's kick off this countdown at number 10 with something fairly new that just debuted last year in 2024 with Nosferatu, starring Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, and Bill Skarsgård. Now, of course, some of you may have already known that this is a remake, but more so for Gen Z, they may not have known that not only was this film remade once, but twice. With the original debuting in 1922 as a silent film, and then in 1979 as a foreign film produced by West German and French companies. And if we want to take it a step further, we can add all three versions of these films to the many Dracula movies that have been made and already exist. But of course, that's a bit of a loose technicality there, considering the very reason why the original silent film was called Nosferatu and not Dracula was because the filmmakers did not have the rights to the original Bram Stoker novel. As a matter of fact, the only reason why the original silent film is known is because not all copies were destroyed as legally ordered to do so by law, and the surviving prints of the film went on to be restored. So just like the undead, the legacy would go on to be resurrected. So just think about next time you're watching any version of the Nosferatu films, which wouldn't have existed if someone didn't break the law.
Dying is cruelty against the unsuspecting, but death is not everything.
But speaking of breaking the law, did you know that one of pop culture's biggest on-screen criminals was a remake?
Say hello to my little friend!
Yes, at number 9 we have Al Pacino as the ambitious, tough Cuban cigar-chomping refugee who gets high on his own supply and thinks the world is his for the taking. And the reactions that people have when I tell them that this is a remake amuse me to this day.
Was you kidding me or what?
Or some even get the same amount of shock when I remind them that Scarface 1983, directed by Brian De Palma, is a remake because of just how long ago the original came out, with the first film actually debuting in 1932, starring Paul Mooney as Tony Camonte. This original black and white crime film is worth watching at least once.
There's only one thing that gets orders and gives orders, and this is it.
Now, being that the original takes place just out of the Roaring '20s, when prohibition and bootlegging gave a leg up to gangsters, racketeers, and members of organized crime, it only made sense to remake this film, this time in the 80s, when the white powdery stuff was popular and hot on the market. So both films pretty much tell the same story in their respective timelines with differences here and there.
Get out of my way, Johnny, I'm gonna spit!
Both Paul Mooney and Al Pacino rock badass looking scars to remind us that neither film may not have existed if it weren't for the real-life Scarface Al Capone and his ambitious endeavors that led him to be the biggest crime boss in Chicago. And by the way, this was a gift from my best friend and producer of this very channel, Mr. Justin Caputo. But while we're on the subject of organized crime, I want to bring up another gangster film that just so happens to be a remake as well. At number 8, we have The Departed, released in 2006, directed by the great Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon. And this film's original predecessor came out only 4 years prior in 2002, which was titled Infernal Affairs and was a foreign film from Hong Kong. Now, without spoiling too much about this original film, if you haven't seen it, both movies respectively are the same. Two moles placed in each other's factions, with an undercover cop infiltrating a crime organization and the other being a criminal moonlighting as a cop inside the police department who secretly works for the city's biggest mob boss. But in the movie Infernal Affairs, one of the major differences between the character of Lau, played by Andy Lau, and Sergeant Sullivan, played by Matt Damon from The Departed, is that the senior Inspector Lau has moments of actually enjoying being a police officer and even struggles with his loyalty to the triads, making the character more complex in the original version than what we see in The Departed. But I recommend watching Infernal Affairs if you like The Departed, and you can see yourself just what the differences are between the two. And speaking of leading a secret life, let's move on to number 7 on our countdown.
Sir? May I see your invitation, please?
Sure. Here's my invitation.
Ah yes, the charm and wittiness of Arnold Schwarzenegger mixed with the usual explosions and hijinks you would find in an action film with True Lies, directed by James Cameron and released in 1994. But did you know that this film was actually a remake of a movie called La Totale, a French foreign film which debuted in 1991? Now, I have to admit, I haven't seen La Totale myself, but based off what I've heard and researched, yeah, this is one of those cases where the remake might actually be better. And you can tell just by watching clips of La Totale that the story definitely benefited from bigger Hollywood names as well as budget. But what's interesting is that a lot of La Totale's cinematographic shots were actually copied in True Lies, and yet the entire feel and the tone of both movies is quite different. So I actually want to leave this open to you guys. Let me know if you've seen the film La Totale, and comment below, is it worth a watch? But it doesn't even end there. Did you guys know that True Lies was remade into a TV series, and it came out in 2023? Look, I was watching a lot of TV at that time, and I had heard absolutely nothing about this. As a matter of fact, it was only now, when I was making this video, that I had come across this fact. But I guess with an unfortunate score of 5.2 on IMDb and 42% on Rotten Tomatoes, it's no wonder no one is talking about it. Awkward. But is it as awkward as the reoccurring themes of this next remake coming in at number 6?
But, did you tell them that I'm white?
You're white? Stop the car! Oh my God!
Now, Guess Who, directed by Kevin Rodney, is a movie that I particularly enjoy and has unfortunately become forgotten over time since its debut in 2005, diving into the uncomfortable topics of breaking old traditions and dating outside the ethnic background. In this comedic story starring Ashton Kutcher and the late great Bernie Mac, it's also forgotten that this film is actually a loose remake of the original 1967 film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Now, the original is about a Caucasian girl bringing home a black man to her white family.
What the hell is going on here?
And the remake flips the script with a black woman bringing home Ashton Kutcher to her black family.
So what, they don't have any available young black men in New York anymore?
Well, you know, they just ran out last week, Grandpa.
I'm just trying to figure out why you chose to go this way.
Both films really delve into the challenges of race and approval, which unfortunately is still relevant to this day. But the films do end on a positive message, reminding everyone that no matter what challenges lie ahead for the happy couples, it doesn't matter what color you are, in the end, the love between two people is the most important thing.
And the colored girls go do-do-do, do-do, do-do-do, do. Ebony and ivory.
But one thing the original does differently is that it raises the stakes with John's family also coming to dinner, not knowing that their future daughter-in-law's family is white. And you can just imagine what kind of scene that would entail.
That's the story of, that's the glory of love.
Now, I want to bring up another film that debuted in the 60s, but first let's talk about one we're all familiar with.
Professor, I lost 300 pounds in 30 seconds. Thanks, Mega Shake.
At number 5, we have The Nutty Professor, released in 1996, directed by Tom Shadyac, starring the legendary Eddie Murphy. Kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde, if you will, but it's a comedy. Although some people say it's pronounced Jekyll, I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I digress. But The Nutty Professor tells the story of plus-size Professor Sherman Klump, who takes a substance created by himself from his lab, turning him into the smooth, suave Buddy Love, who is everything the professor is not, but wishes he could be. However, the original movie of the same name actually released in 1963 and had its main character also played by a popular comedian at the time, that being, of course, Jerry Lewis. But unlike its modern retelling, Professor Julius Kelp is not an overweight man, but rather a nerdy, awkward, and clumsy chemistry teacher. Now, I've seen both movies, but personally for me, the remake is more relatable to me, not just because it's more up to date with modern times, but that's the type of comedy that I find entertaining.
You want your colon clean? Fine, I'm gonna clean mine. Yeah, now my colon is clean. I'm talking squeaky clean.
Where the original relies more on silly gags and the many funny faces of Jerry Lewis. And that's not to say the original isn't any good. Both actors give very contrasting performances to their opposite characters. So much, in fact, that you really do buy them as different people and you would never be able to tell that they are the same person. And is it just me, or is the transformation scene in the original Nutty Professor something out of a horror movie? This might actually be a good time to bring up another film, which involves another scientist that goes through a transformation that ends up being not for the better.
When you went through, something went wrong.
You are about to go beyond that limit.
At number 4, we have The Fly, released in 1986, directed by David Cronenberg, starring Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. Now, if you had already known that this film was a remake of the 1958 original of the same name, I hope your back and knees aren't hurting too much today. Now, granted that the more recent adaptation is more relatable in sense of modern day settings, I think the original still holds up today and has its own creepiness about it. Not to mention it also stars the great Vincent Price. Now, granted that both films are about a scientist that ends up turning into a man-fly, there are quite a lot of differences between both films despite being horror movies. For example, the relationship between the main characters' love interests. Where Gina Davis is more of a girlfriend, actress Patricia Owens plays his wife, and the two scientists have different names in their respective films. But I think the most interesting differences between these films are Jeff Goldblum doesn't necessarily transform into a man-sized fly per se, more of a fusion between the two, which is made clear in the film.
I'm the offspring of Brundle and Housefly.
And in the original, David Hedison's fly has body parts switched between him and the fly that caused the experiment to go wrong, with his head and arm now switched with the fly's respective body parts of the same nature. I mean, with either version, you're pretty f***ed, and maybe there's just some experiments out there that shouldn't be conducted. In any case, I'd say the original Fly is a good representation of good old classic horror, and the remake is more of a body horror movie, which was a very popular genre in the 80s. But if we're going to talk about body horror movies from the 80s, I couldn't do it without bringing up this next film. At number 3, this 1982 remake brought to us by John Carpenter, titled The Thing, starring Kurt Russell, is another sci-fi horror film which really revolutionized special effects and movie magic when it came to portraying body horror on screen. However, there was an original film, titled The Thing from Another World, released in 1951 and was a black and white sci-fi film that was part of a trend during that time with alien creatures and invaders from other planets in the 1950s pop culture. But in the original film, the creature is not portrayed as something that can replicate its victims, but more of a humanoid Frankenstein-looking figure while still having origins from outer space. Now, both movies are film adaptations based on the novella titled Who Goes There?, written by author John W. Campbell and published all the way back in 1938. Now, I've never read the book myself, but based on my research, it's the 1982 film that gives more of a faithful adaptation to the source material. Now, just for the record, these films never actually scare me per se, but I do like them because I'm the person who is always more fascinated than was scared when it comes to these movies. But if you want to know what does scare me and creep me out when I do watch it, then maybe it would be a good time to bring up the original film from this remake.
Forward! Tell me when it's over.
At number 2, we have The Wizard of Oz, released in 1939, directed by Victor Fleming, George Cukor, and Norman Turog. And now you might be wondering, Kenny, what exactly is so scary about this film to you? Well, actually, it's not this film, but the original on-screen movie as a silent film, released in 1925, and I mean, come on, just look at this footage. It's pure nightmare fuel, and this is way scarier than aliens and experiments gone wrong that have resulted in mutilating human bodies, if you ask me. I even think this film is scarier than the original Nosferatu silent film I talked about earlier. Look, we all know the story of The Wizard of Oz, so I'm not going to spend too much time going over it, because just looking at the old footage of this silent version gives me the creeps. On a side note, check out my reaction to Wicked. It's one of my most popular videos. It is up on the channel now. Okay everyone, future editing Kenny here. I have to interrupt the video because during my research of the 1925 silent film, I had not realized at the time that I had made this video that there was actually another Wizard of Oz silent film that had existed even before 1925. In 1910, Otis Turner would direct the very first live adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. And what's even more interesting about this film is that Frank Baum, the author of the original The Wonderful Wizard of Oz book, had a co-writing credit to this film. Although some sources will seem to have that unconfirmed, but that just goes to show you how old this 1910 adaptation is. And just like the 1925 film, yes, this version scares the ever-living flying monkeys out of me. So this means that the Wizard of Oz film that we're all familiar with, starring Judy Garland, is actually the third on-screen adaptation. I guess just like the ruby slippers, which are actually silver in the book, you gotta do it 3 times to get it right. Now back to the video. But because I'm so freaked out just by looking at that footage, I want to end on a happy note and talk about this last film at number 1.
Yeah, that's it. Ow! You're sick! You're sick! Why would you do that to me? I'm just kidding you, pal.
And our final remake at number 1, we have Mr. Deeds, released in 2002, directed by Stephen Brill, starring the great Adam Sandler as the great lead Mr. Deeds himself. Now, I wanted to bring this film up because out of our entire list, this is the one for sure that always gets people to look it up on the internet to see if it's truly a remake. Seriously, there's not one person that I've known that knew that this was a remake when I told them.
I saw your face, you were like...
With the original film coming out in 1936, titled Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, the premise is pretty much the same, with the character of Longfellow Deeds, played by Gary Cooper, being a greeting card poet who travels to the big city after inheriting a massive fortune. And like I said, the original had its lead played by Gary Cooper, who was a well-known actor at the time, so it's kind of sad how everyone forgot about this classic.
Whatever happened to Gary Cooper? The strong, silent type.
Both movies are very heartfelt in nature, with comedy and romance here and there.
Miss Dawson here wasn't with me, I'd probably knock your heads together.
Oh, I don't mind.
Well, all right, maybe I will.
And if it wasn't for Miss Dawson being here, I'd probably knock your heads in.
I don't mind.
Okay.
But once again, not to spoil too much, I'd say the biggest differences between the two are the film's endings. Now, both movies give us a satisfying ending and end happily for the characters that we root for. They just go about it in their different but respective ways. So if you are in the mood to see a heartfelt black and white classic and you want to study how they did films back in those old days of the 1930s, I definitely say give this one a shot. Well folks, that's gonna be a wrap on my countdown to the top 10 movies you didn't know were remakes. Comment below, let me know if you've seen any of these original films, and tell me which version you like better. And do you know of any more films that are remakes that I didn't include in this video? Comment below and maybe I'll make another video featuring your pick. Otherwise, be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell, but only if you're good looking. Be sure to check out more of the artwork in the back painted by yours truly, and visit the social media links down below if you want to see more. Thank you all for watching, and if any other actor gets to portray the same character I did in one of my original films, well, good luck to finding someone that's just as good looking.